This video is sponsored by the APOTHEOSIS Kickstarter campaign. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold while I hoard internet cringe. Do you all want to know the fastest way to get on your DM's good boy list? It's actually a really long and complicated process that I'm gonna lay out for you all right now. Are you ready? Step 1, pay attention. Step 2, repeat step 1. That's it. That's the entire long and drawn out plan on how to engage with your DM's world in a way that will make them appreciate you as a player. Of course, this is an exaggeration. There's a lot more nuance that goes into maintaining a healthy DM/player relationship. But the simple act of doing things like taking notes and asking questions is a great way to get started. However, I'm not going to act like the advice I give in my videos is a one-size-fits-all solution to every problem you'll face. If that were the case, I wouldn't be doing YouTube. Instead, I'd be selling my omniscient services to the highest bidder. You know, to teach more billionaires how to get into space. In fact, the story I have for you today directly contradicts the advice I just gave. Today's story stars a DM who becomes furious with a new player for being too engaged. Yeah, he's really that unhinged. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This story is titled, I Deceive the Gods and Get Kicked Out of the Session for It. A little bit of backstory before the tale. This was my first campaign that I was ever a part of. My introduction to D&D. To this day, this tale has made me very cautious on how I build characters, and even go into new sessions. I'm also able to admit that I am not without fault here. I definitely said some things that I probably shouldn't have, and took a lot of advantage with certain things. Disclaimer, all names have been changed to protect everyone's privacy. The cast. Me. D&D virgin, wide-eyed newbie, meticulous note-taker, lover of lore and good stories. Usually that member of the friend group who walks behind the others when the sidewalk is too narrow. The party's high elf rogue. DM. The Dungeon Master, weaver of epic ballads, helpful and creative friend who invited me to the campaign. Hater of OP characters, which is fair usually, but this extent not so much. And note-takers better than him. Teed, guy who helped me get my hands on the player's handbook and Dungeon Master's guide so I can learn. The party's red dragonborn cleric. Mitch, good friend of the DM, encouraged role-playing at the table, helped me come out of my shell a little bit in the group. The party's dwarven paladin. Now that the cast is present and accounted for, let's begin with the tale. Around 5 or 6 years ago, I was in my senior year of high school, just chilling out and doing my thing, when my good friend DM asked me if I had ever heard of Dungeons & Dragons. He invited me to join a campaign he was running that had a seat open up after one of his usual people left due to moving away for college. After school, we went down to our local game shop to meet the rest of the party. Teed was the resident bookkeeper. He had all the books that we were going to be using and loaned them to people, while Mitch was mostly in charge of snacks, since he always knew a guy or a guy who knows someone who could get him a good deal on really great snacks. There were a few others who were not important to this story. After introductions were made, DM lets me play a monster, a cave bear IIRC, to get used to how combat worked as I read through the player's handbook and the DMG for that day's session. When the session was over, Teed and DM stayed behind to help me make a character, while Mitch and the others went home. It took a while, but eventually Thildon, a rogue with a penchant for bullshit, deception, and a habit of taking down notes every day of important information, keen mind feat plus a way to use my notes in-game, was born. Thildon had his highest scores in charisma and dexterity, with expertise in deception and sleight of hand. The group met him with some trepidation at first, because he was a rogue with the noble background, having learned his roguish skills from being bored and having no expectations as the 10th child in the family. Teed's character, Brunner, decided to give Thildon a chance to join the group, while Mitch's character, Venet, felt like they had to be both a protector for this spoiled brat and a bit of a probation officer to keep him from stealing things. At first, I was nervous, and it showed a bit at the table. But with some encouragement from Mitch, I found a love for role-playing, and soon became enthralled, often talking while taking my meticulous notes for the session. Around level 6, Teed and Mitch get a messenger, telling them that they are being summoned to the Gathering of the Churches, a national gathering of churches of all the deities to celebrate the whole pantheon. The party gets lost on the way, forgetting which town we were supposed to go to, cueing me to share my notes with both of them in and out of character. It gets us where we need to go, and we set up camp for the night. During the gathering, I went around to every single church present to learn as much as I could about the whole deific pantheon and their relationships, because it could be useful to me as a rogue. DM, amazed that someone would want to learn that much, shared everything about the deities through what the clerics knew, and naturally I put that in my notes. I also went about that night and stole a holy symbol from each church, because hey, useful for bullshit if my rogue gets in trouble. After the session, Mitch asked me to hang back for a bit. He told me that he is impressed by the detail in my notes, but to maybe back off on them a little bit, because DM is also a good note-taker, and hates competition as a note-taker, because he loves being asked if we can make a check to remember things. After assuring Mitch that I wouldn't frequently use my notes so that the DM could have fun, I went home. I didn't know exactly what his warning was about, but boy would I learn. You know, it kind of feels like I'm forgetting something. Ow, motherfucker! Huh, what's this? Huh, so that's where they went. I thought they all went on vacation. Oh, I forgot this video has a sponsor! APOTHEOSIS is a brand new RPG system being brought to you by members of the TTRPG community just like you. This game is something special, taking some of the best attributes of other role-playing games while also flipping the scripts. One of the best parts of this system is its character creation. Gone are the days of being forced to choose just one race and one class. APOTHEOSIS gives you a whole damn buffet to choose from. The game has all the classic fantasy races we all know and love. Dwarves, elves, orcs, but it also brings some brand new races to the table. My favorite of these new races are the Neurocytes, small little insect creatures that pilot their hosts like horrifying flesh Gundams. Now I can finally be a parasite both on the table and in real life. And yes, before you ask, they even have some races for all you furries out there, so you can infect this system with your degeneracy too. But the real kicker is that APOTHEOSIS throws the class-based character creation system out the window, and instead gives players the ultimate customization experience. So after doing some quick math, I discovered that APOTHEOSIS offers somewhere in the ballpark of 500,000 meaningfully unique character builds. Literally, the only limit is your imagination. And that's all before we even got into the game itself. APOTHEOSIS overhauls RPG combat and magic systems by keeping things organized, realistic, and dynamic. All the weapons are meaningfully unique, with special properties that make each shot or swing feel different from the last. And the spells have variety and reward creativity. And the best part of the whole thing? I'm in the game! That's right, just message Den of the Drake to APOTHEOSIS TRPG on Facebook or Twitter, and they'll respond by sending you stats for an exclusive boss monster, the Drake, which can be used in your APOTHEOSIS games. Finally, you can unleash me on your players to kill them with cringe. Link to the Kickstarter and social media accounts are in the description, and tell them that you come from the Den of the Drake. A few sessions passed and our party was heading by the sea, when suddenly we were attacked by some creatures. One specifically targeted me to knock me over a cliff, causing me to lose a random amount of my notebooks in-game, amounting to me losing a lot of information access in-game. While I was allowed to choose some of what I had lost, the DM also made me lose everything I had on the deities. Luckily, the game had only been 3 weeks since the gathering, so I made another notebook after the encounter was over thanks to the Keen Mind feat. I had to do this a couple more times because the DM kept trying to destroy them, until I traded the sorcerer for a scroll with a spell that would let me remember the information indefinitely. Granted, the events down the road would certainly justify why he might do a thing like that. Fast forward to level 16. We're summoned to the realm of gods to seek assistance in taking out the BBEG. Knowing this was coming, and figuring the deities would give us boons, I prepared my best bullshit requests and excuses, ready to take full advantage like I never had before using my notes that I had on the deities. Up until this point, I had only ever used it to bluff my way out of trouble with a church a handful of times, and IRL a year had passed since Mitch's warning, which I had forgotten about. We go to the gods and they say that they see the need for us to succeed, because the big bad evil guy wanted to become a deity too. But the BBEG was universally hated by all but a few of the gods. But the vote had been passed to help us by granting boons. The dissenters of the choice did not want to help, so they didn't give us anything. Only 2 deities refrained. When it came to my turn to interact with the deities, I wanted to bullshit them and tell them that their rival was giving me, or had given me, something powerful enough that they'd step up and give me something better, playing on their pride. At first, the DM tried to stop me from remembering it. But then I reminded him of the scroll that let me keep the information on the gods. Okay, fine. But you have to roll at least an 18 on the d20 to bullshit the gods that much. So, to be frank, OP is kind of acting like a munchkin, which can be pretty annoying to a DM just trying to run a game. However, here is where we see our problem DM's fatal mistake. If you aren't comfortable with a player succeeding at a certain action, do not let them roll for it. There are only a few end results that letting a player roll for something like this will get you. None of them are good. You could have them roll and then make the DC impossible to meet, which will result in the player thinking your game is bullshit. Or they could succeed only for you to retcon it later, which will then result in the player thinking your game is bullshit. Finally, you could just let them do whatever they want and force yourself to live with the consequences of their successful rolls, which will result in you thinking your game is bullshit. At the end of the day, you are the DM, the only entity at the table whose ruling overturns even that of the dice. Now, don't take this as a sign to start overruling your players' decisions all the time and start railroading, because that's an even faster way to piss off your players. So I rolled for each deity after RPing what I had wanted to say, referencing my notes from the gathering, and each time my die came up with at least 18, having 2 cases of nat 20s on deception for the pantheon of 10 participating deities. This gave me some pretty broken boons, and it was wrong to take them maybe, but I didn't realize at the time how bad it was. A little later that session, and we come across what is supposed to be a really powerful foe, who I made cry with the power of the boons from the gods, leaving the DM pissed. I realized how hard this would make the game for the DM, so I asked if I could talk with them in private after the session. The end of the session rolls around and the DM still looks very pissed off at me. Oh, hey DM, I realized that I kinda broken the game with my boons from the gods. DM, no shit, jackass. I think your dice might be loaded. No, they're not loaded, and you could check them yourself. Anyway, not what I'm trying to say. Maybe we could retire Thyldan and have him be accepted as a deity. Or we could have him be on the run from the other gods when they realize how he bullshitted them. And I could roll up a new DM. No, I think it would be best if you just left the group. That hit me out of left field and kinda pissed me off. I was trying to work with him to make it easier for him and still play at the table. Back then, though, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder and a temper to boot. I'm not proud of how I came at him, and admittedly, I should have just said, okay, got my shit and left. Instead, I argued. Me. Oh, why? All I did was use the information I had the way my character would have. DM. You shouldn't have had that information to begin with. Keen mind only goes so far, and you stole the scroll meant for the sorcerer to memorize something very important to him. Me. Nah, brah, I traded for it. Gave him enough money to commission another one of those scrolls in addition to a staff I had found. Plus, you let me roll for it. If you don't want that shit to happen, do not let me roll for it, asshat! If you make me roll for it, you leave it to the will of the dice, and have to abide by the results. DM. Those rolls were extremely unlikely to happen like that. I never thought you'd do it. Me. Well, I certainly tried to do it, and guess what? I fucking did it! Mathematically improbable, but still possible. Want it impossible? Don't let me roll. DM. You are not a part of the table any longer, no matter how much you argue with me. And so I left, still fuming. I later learned from Mitch that the next session the DM had the gods insta-kill Thyldan for his deceitful actions, and a new rule was added to the table that anyone with keen mind was not allowed to take notes in-game. He also spread lies about how I had physically assaulted him after the session, when he was only asking me to retire the character and make a new one, claiming that I had made the stance of, if Thyldan it wasn't allowed, I was gone, and I'd kick his ass for it. How much the party believed, I'll never know, because they all cut off contact with me after that. End of story. Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but it's super obvious to me that OP is leaving some stuff out. I mean, we got a guy with a history of self-admitted anger issues, having an entire friend group cut off contact, just because he took good notes. Sorry, OP, but I don't buy it. Whether you realize it or not, you did something to upset the entire group. I'm betting it has something to do with your munchkin habits mixed with some unrestrained outbursts due to your self-admitted anger issues. As for the DM, if what OP said about him was true, which I'm pretty skeptical about, then this guy is doing DMing the absolute wrong way. Information isn't something to try and monopolize. It sounds to me like this DM just never learned how to say no to his players, which led to his frustrations boiling up when it came time to deal with OP, which led to him dealing with the situation in a less than favorable way. At least I think that's what happened. I wasn't taking any notes. Now before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art is done by viewer Dortchild, and depicts both myself and their artificer character demonstrating our mastery of flame, as we prepare to embark on a fantastic adventure. Finally, the power of the cringe hoarder is mine. With him by my side, I will stake my claim to the entire realm. Riches beyond my wildest dreams will be mine, and the rulers of this world will cower before the awesome might of... Bro, chill, we're just going down the street to get some Chinese food. I swear to God, if you embarrass me in front of the noodle guy, I will be so pissed. Thank you again, Dortchild, for sending in your art. If you want to see your artwork displayed in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can create content that inspires artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.